Imagine walking through a European city, the air filled with guitar music, cafe chatter, and tour guides talking about kings and cathedrals. You pass a beautiful old bridge, a towering bell tower, narrow stone streets. It feels like any other romantic European destination. But what if I told you that for centuries, this European city was one of the greatest centers of Islamic civilization on earth? That its skyline was once dominated not by church bells, but by the Adhan. That scholars, imams, Jewish rabbis, and Christian priests walked the same streets, under the flag of a Muslim emir. For most of us today, Al-Andalus is just a strange word in a dusty history book, or a passing mention in a Friday khutbah. Yet for almost 800 years, huge parts of what is now Spain and Portugal were ruled by Muslims. Not as a side note, not as a brief invasion, but as a civilization, with cities, universities, libraries, farms, palaces, mosques, and bustling markets. So how did Islam reach the heart of Europe? Who were the Muslims of Al-Andalus? And why has one of the brightest chapters of our history been almost erased from our memories? To answer that, we have to travel back to the year 711. On the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula, a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad stands with his army, looking across the sea they have just crossed. Behind them, according to many reports, their ships have been burned. There is no going back. Forces meet the army of King Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete. The Visigothic kingdom collapses with shocking speed. Within a few years, most of the Iberian Peninsula is under Muslim control, known to the Arabs as Al-Andalus. A new chapter has begun, and Europe will never be the same. To understand how extraordinary this was, we need some contrast. Much of Christian Europe at this time is struggling. Many cities are small, dirty, and unsafe after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Education is limited to a narrow circle of clergy. Reading and writing are rare skills. Public baths, street lighting, and complex irrigation systems are mostly forgotten memories from Roman days. But in Al-Andalus, especially in the centuries that follow, something different begins to grow. The new Muslim rulers do not destroy the cities they find. They repair them, expand them, and sometimes completely transform them. The most famous of these cities is Córdoba, which will become one of the most dazzling capitals in the world. When the Umayyad prince Abd al-Rahman I escapes from the Abbasids in the east and arrives in Al-Andalus, he chooses Córdoba as his base. He is a refugee, the last survivor of a hunted dynasty. Yet within a generation, this refugee builds a stable emirate on the edge of Europe. Under his descendants, Córdoba turns into a city that travelers will compare with Baghdad, Damascus, and Constantinople. Its mosques, bridges, water channels, and markets attract people from every corner of the region. If you could walk through Córdoba in its golden age, you would see something that would shock many people's assumptions about medieval Islam and medieval Europe. You would see paved streets lit by lamps at night, while most of Paris and London are still dark and muddy. You would hear Arabic, Romance dialects, Berber languages, Hebrew, and Latin. In the same marketplace, a Muslim judge might be discussing a legal question, while a Christian craftsman sells tulle. And a Jewish merchant negotiates a deal on imported silk. Churches, synagogues, and mosques all exist within the same city walls, protected under Islamic law. At the heart of this world stands the Great Mosque of Córdoba. Its forest of red and white arches seems to stretch into infinity, supported by columns taken from older Roman and Visigothic buildings and given a new, unified purpose. Light filters in through carefully designed windows, illuminating Quranic calligraphy and geometric patterns instead of human statues. For the Muslims of Al-Andalus, this mosque is not only a place of prayer. It is a symbol of identity, a statement that Islam is not a foreign visitor in Europe, but at home here, rooted in stone, language, and everyday life. But Al-Andalus is not just about beautiful buildings, it is about what happens inside them. In the mosques and madrasas, in the private homes of scholars, in the workshops of engineers and doctors, a new kind of society is quietly being built. Here, knowledge is not locked away for one tribe or one class. Young students from poor families can memorize Quran, learn Arabic grammar, then move on to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, or law. Christians and Jews, as protected dhimmis, bring their own languages, scriptures, and skills into the discussion. Translators move between Arabic and Latin, between Greek manuscripts and living debates. In a world where many fear the outside, Al-Andalus becomes a bridge between Africa and Europe, between the Islamic East and the Christian West, between the ancient heritage of Greece and the new questions of a changing age. How did this bridge appear, and what made it so strong that even today, echoes of Al-Andalus remain in European languages, architecture, and science? To answer that, we have to go deeper into its golden age, into the courts, libraries, and laboratories of Muslim Spain. In the next moments, we will step inside that world and watch it come alive before us. As the centuries move forward, Al-Andalus enters what many historians call its golden age. Córdoba, once just another provincial city at the edge of the old Roman world, becomes the beating heart of a new kind of civilization. Under Abd al-Rahman III and his successors, the emirate transforms into a powerful caliphate that can look Baghdad in the eye as an equal. This is not just about political power. It is about confidence, culture, and a belief that knowledge itself is a form of worship, a way of reading the signs of Allah in creation. Imagine approaching Córdoba at night during this period. Travelers describe miles of roads lit with lamps, at a time when most cities in northern Europe fall into darkness after sunset. Bridges cross carefully managed rivers. Water channels bring fresh, clean water not just to palaces, but to public baths, gardens, and ordinary homes. The smell of orange blossoms and herbs hangs in the air. At dawn, the adhan echoes from minarets, answered by church bells and synagogue prayers in different corners of the city. This is not a storybook. This was real, and it lasted for generations. Inside the city, the true power of Al-Andalus is not only in its walls, but in its books. One of the most striking contrasts between Muslim Spain and much of logic, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, side by side with Greek texts translated into Arabic and commentaries written by Muslim scholars. This world produces figures whose names are still known, even if their origin in Al-Andalus is often forgotten. Take al-Zahrawi, known in the West as Abulcasis, a pioneering surgeon who lives near Córdoba in Christian Europe, is the love of libraries. While some European monasteries guard a few dozen manuscripts as priceless treasures, Córdoba's main library alone is reported to hold hundreds of thousands of volumes. There are entire industries built around copying, binding, and selling books. Bookstores line the markets. A young student can find works on tafsir, fiqh, grammar, poetry, logic, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, side by side with Greek texts translated into Arabic and commentaries written by Muslim scholars. This world produces figures whose names are still known, even if their origin in Al-Andalus is often forgotten. Take al-Zahrawi, known in the West as Abulcasis, a pioneering surgeon who lives near Córdoba in the 10th and 11th centuries. He writes an encyclopedia of medicine and surgery so detailed that European doctors will use it as a standard textbook for hundreds of years after his death. He describes surgical instruments, explains how to treat fractures, dislocations, childbirth complications, even how to perform delicate operations on the eyes and ears. When modern historians look back, they find techniques in his work that feel surprisingly close to today's methods. Or look at Ibn Hazm, the brilliant and sometimes controversial scholar of law, theology, and literature. Growing up among the elite of Córdoba, he witnesses both the height of the caliphate and its collapse into chaos. Out of this experience, he writes not only books on Islamic legal theory, but also works like The Ring of the Dove, an exploration of love and human emotion unlike anything else in medieval literature. In his pages, we see a mind shaped by Quran and Hadith, but also deeply aware of the complexities of the human heart. He argues, debates, disagrees, but always from within a culture where writing and reasoning are honored. The streets of Al-Andalus also echo with the footsteps of Jewish and Christian thinkers who thrive under Muslim rule. The great Jewish philosopher and physician Maimonides, for example, is born in Córdoba. Although he will later leave due to political turmoil, his early formation happens in this environment. Studying Arabic, reading Muslim philosophers, learning from the medical knowledge that circulates in Andalusi circles. He writes in Arabic as well as Hebrew and engages directly with ideas that move through the Islamic world. For him, as for many others, Al-Andalus is not just a home. It is a gateway to a wider intellectual universe. One of the most extraordinary aspects of this civilization is the way it brings together theory and practice. In the fields around cities like Seville, Valencia, and Toledo, Muslim agronomists experiment with new crops and irrigation methods. They introduce or popularize things like rice, sugarcane, citrus fruits, pomegranates, cotton, and certain types of wheat. They refine systems of canals, water wheels, and underground channels to maximize the use of rivers and rainfall. Instead of leaving farming to uneducated peasants, they treat it as a science, writing manuals that explain soil types, crop rotation, and pest control. As a result, parts of Al-Andalus become some of the most productive agricultural lands in Europe. Inside the houses of craftsmen, a different kind of knowledge takes shape. Artisans develop advanced techniques in leatherwork, ceramics, textiles, and metalwork. The famous Cordovan leather becomes a luxury product exported across the Mediterranean. Tiles from Andalusi kilns decorate mosques, palaces, and later even Christian churches. Geometric patterns, arabesques, and calligraphy spread, carrying Quranic verses and poetic lines into the visual fabric of the cities. Even today, when tourists walk through the Alhambra in Granada or the Old Quarter of Córdoba, they are often struck by a feeling that this art is both deeply Islamic and strangely familiar, as if echoing in modern designs, logos, and patterns. Of course, this golden age is not some perfect utopia. There are political rivalries, rebellions, injustices, and sins, like in every human society. But compared to much of Europe at the time, Al-Andalus stands out for its relative tolerance and openness. Christians and Jews are not equal citizens. They pay the jizya tax and live under certain legal restrictions. Yet they are allowed to worship, to run their communities, to engage in trade, and sometimes to rise to high positions in administration and medicine. In many European kingdoms of that era, religious minorities face far harsher treatment, forced conversions or expulsions. In Al-Andalus, coexistence is not a slogan. It is a practical reality built into everyday life. This coexistence creates a constant flow of ideas. When Christian kingdoms in the north of Spain slowly gain strength, they do not only fight against Muslim rulers, they also learn from them. After cities like Toledo are conquered, Christian leaders quickly realize the value of the libraries and scholars they find there. Instead of burning the books, they invite Muslim and Jewish translators to work alongside Christian clerics, turning Arabic works into Latin. Through this translation movement, the knowledge of Al-Andalus begins to seep into the rest of Europe. Algebra, advanced astronomy, new medical techniques, philosophical commentaries on Aristotle and Plato. Many of the ideas that will later fuel the European Renaissance come with an Arabic accent, carried by people who studied in the shadow of Andalusi minarets. Here we see one of the great ironies of history. While some modern narratives paint Islamic civilization as the enemy of European progress, the reality of Al-Andalus shows almost the opposite. At a time when parts of Europe are closing in on themselves, suspicious of reason and philosophy, Muslim Spain is absorbing, refining, and transmitting knowledge. Where others see pagans and heretics, Andalusi scholars see texts to be studied, measured against revelation and logic, then either embraced, corrected, or refuted. They are confident enough in their faith to open the door to foreign ideas, trusting that truth will survive examination. But golden ages do not last forever. The same wealth and sophistication that make Al-Andalus shine also attract jealousy, ambition, and division. Internal conflicts, regional identities, and power struggles slowly eat away at the unity of the caliphate. After the fall of the Umayyad Caliphate of Córdoba in the early 11th century, the once mighty realm breaks into smaller kingdoms, known as taifas. Some of these mini-states are brilliant centers of culture, sponsoring poets, builders, and scholars. Yet politically they are weak, often forced to pay tribute to northern Christian kingdoms in exchange for peace. The balance of power is beginning to shift, and the same land that once felt like a permanent home for Islam in Europe is becoming a battlefield whose future is uncertain. From the outside, the age of the Taifa kingdoms still looks beautiful. Poets write verses that make crowds cry. Palaces rise with walls of carved stucco and pools reflecting the sky. But behind the elegance there is anxiety. One by one, the Christian kingdoms in the north push their borders south, testing the strength of each Muslim ruler. Some taifas hire Christian knights as mercenaries against their Muslim rivals. Others pay huge sums of gold to buy a few more years of peace. The Ummah that once entered Iberia as a unified force is now split into competing courts. In response to this weakness, new powers arrive from North Africa. First the Almoravids, then the Almohads. They crossed the sea with the promise of defending Islam, of restoring the unity and discipline of earlier days. For a time, they succeed in pushing back the Christian advance and re-centralizing authority. Yet they too face internal divisions, rigid policies, and the difficulty of ruling a land with many ethnicities, languages, and expectations. While they argue and tighten their grip, cities like Toledo and Lisbon slip permanently into Christian hands. By 13th century, most of Al-Andalus has fallen. Only the Nasrid kingdom of Granada remains, a slender strip of fertile land backed by mountains and facing the Mediterranean Sea. There, on a hill overlooking the city, rises the Alhambra, perhaps the most famous palace of Islamic Spain. Its walls whisper with Quranic verses and poetry praising Allah. Water channels run through courtyards, feeding fountains that seem to defy the dry climate. From the outside, Granada glows like a jewel, but it is a jewel caught between closing fingers. Under constant pressure, Granada's rulers sign treaties, pay tribute, and play a dangerous game of diplomacy. They balance between rival Christian kingdoms and North African dynasties, trying to survive in a world where their very existence feels temporary. In 1492, after a long siege, the last Muslim ruler, Abu Abdallah, known to the Spanish as Boabdil, rides out of the city and hands the keys of Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella. With that gesture, 8 centuries of formal Muslim rule in Iberia come to an end. What follows is not an age of coexistence, but of erasure. Within years, mosques are converted into churches or demolished. Arabic books are burned in public squares. Muslims and Jews are forced to convert or leave. Those who hide their faith, the Moriscos, live under constant suspicion, and even they are eventually expelled. A land that once spoke Arabic, recited Quran openly, and sent scholars across the Mediterranean is taught to forget its own past. And yet, Al-Andalus refuses to disappear. It lives on in Spanish and Portuguese words of Arabic origin, in irrigation channels still used by farmers, in buildings tourists admire without knowing their roots. More than that, it survives as a mirror for us, asking, with the faith, minds, and tools Allah has given, what kind of civilization will we choose to build now, today?